Today we're going to talk about travel health, which as a nurse is one of my favorite topics to discuss because we all want to stay healthy while we travel. Now specifically, I'm going to talk about travel vaccines and which ones you might want to consider as you start planning your adventures around the world. Now, back when I started traveling in the mid-90s, I had all of these questions myself. It was like, there's all these vaccines available. Do I really need to go get all of them before I start traveling? So today we're going to try and answer some of those questions. Which diseases are out there that we have vaccines for? What do those diseases look like and how are they transmitted? And then if you do decide to get any particular vaccine, what that schedule might actually look like. So I'm sure you will not be surprised to hear me say that I am issuing a disclaimer that this video is not intended to give you personalized medical advice. We are here to answer some basic questions, but you're going to need to see your own healthcare provider to make any final determination on whether you get a vaccine or not. And there are some very good reasons for that, which we're going to go through here, because there are some things you need to know that are going to be very specific to you to help you make these decisions. For example, one of the first things you're going to get asked is, which countries are you going to? Some countries have certain endemic diseases that do not exist in other countries, so the vaccines you're going to consider are going to depend on your itinerary. Even within those countries, there may be regions within the countries where the disease is and regions where the disease is not, and you won't have to worry about it, so it's going to depend. Another thing you're going to want to consider is the time of year. Some diseases flourish in the hot season or the rainy season and might be more of an issue than if you go in the middle of winter. So the time of year you are traveling will make a difference. Another question to answer is, how long are you going to stay in that particular country? If you're someone like me and you're staying for 2 months, that's going to be very different for someone who might just be coming through on a layover in an airport and then heading out to somewhere else. The longer you stay in an area, the higher your risk. The next thing you're going to want to talk about with your medical provider is you, because it's going to make a difference depending on your age, your health conditions, your pre-existing medical history. That will all play a factor into which vaccines are going to be appropriate for you. Another important thing to note is that countries might have access to different brands of vaccines, which means the vaccine that you get in the United States might not be exactly the same as the vaccine you get in Thailand or in Australia or Peru. So you have to do some research to see, because these different brands could potentially have different side effects. They're very likely to have different costs. Sometimes it can be a lot more affordable to get vaccines outside of the United States. But also one thing you're going to want to pay attention to is, especially if you are getting a series of vaccines that, it takes 3 doses over several months, and if you're planning on mixing and matching those different brands, you just want to make sure that you're going to get the benefit that you're hoping for. So our first category, just real briefly, I wanted to mention is the routine vaccinations that you probably started getting when you were a kid. For the most part, those aren't going to be hugely impactful while you travel, but a couple you might get asked about. Polio, particularly, I think it's still endemic in Afghanistan and Pakistan, which might not be the most common tourist destinations, but I know this audience goes to some fun places, and hey, K2 is in Pakistan, so you might want to go there. Another one to consider is tetanus. Tetanus is definitely one you want to keep up with. You need a booster every 10 years, so just pay attention to when you had that the last time. And finally here, I just throw in your annual flu and COVID shots just to keep up with those as you normally would. Let's look at hepatitis. Now, hepatitis is an inflammation of the liver that can be caused from a variety of different viruses. But today we're going to look at specifically hepatitis A and hepatitis B. Hepatitis A is usually a result of poor hygiene and can be contracted from eating contaminated food or water, where hepatitis B is a blood-borne pathogen, which means that you can get it from sexual activity, sharing needles or razors, or getting tattoos. To get vaccinated for hepatitis, if you choose only to get vaccinated for hepatitis A, that can usually be done in 2 doses. Hepatitis B takes 3 doses, usually over 6 months, so sometimes that can be longer. But these vaccines do come combined into one, which is nice, and you can get all 3 done in 3 shots over about 6 months. the good thing about hepatitis that is unless you fall into one of several high-risk categories, once you complete this regimen, you're probably never going to need a booster. Next, we're going to look at typhoid. Now, similar to hepatitis A, typhoid fever is spread through a lack of sanitation, and so is usually contracted by ingesting contaminated food or contaminated water. It is actually related to salmonella poisoning, food poisoning that you hear about. It is a cousin to that, but it can be potentially deadly, and in a lot of people, it can take weeks to months to fully recover from an infection. Now, this vaccine actually comes in two different ways, at least in the United States. You can get an injection or you can take a pill. The injection you just need once and it's done, and then you need to get a booster every 2 years. With the pill form, it is a series of 4 pills that you take every other day over a week. And then if you can get that version, that is good for 5 years. So you only need to get the booster every 5 years. For me, I prefer the oral medication just because it lasts longer, but note that the manufacturers have been having some trouble. And so lately in the United States, that can be a little bit harder to find. The next one we're going to talk about is Japanese encephalitis. Now, this is transmitted to humans through the bite of an infected mosquito. Now, interestingly enough, the mosquito can't actually catch this from biting humans. It only gets infected when it bites the infected pigs or waterfowl. So this isn't usually something that you're going to see in bigger cities. If you're just going to Bangkok, then it might not get recommended that you get a vaccine for Japanese encephalitis. But if you are going out to any more rural areas,
rural.
But if you are going out to any more rural areas, it's in 24 different countries in Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific, then this might be one to consider. It's also much more likely to get infected during the hot and rainy seasons. Now, the vaccine is a simple schedule. It is given in 2 doses, 1 month apart. So next up, we're going to talk about malaria. Now, malaria is found in tropical countries all around the world. It is spread through the bite of an infected mosquito. It gets into your liver, it gets into your red blood cells, and if left untreated, it can be fatal. Now, for most of us, we're not going to be looking at a vaccine, but we're going to look for prophylactic medication. This is medication that you're going to take before you get to the country, while you're there, and then probably for a week or 2 after you get home. This medication is very specific to where you're going. There are multiple kinds. There's 8 or 9 different kinds of medication that will work, but they're very specific to the region of the world that you're going. There are areas that have become resistant to some of these medications. So you want to make sure you're taking the right thing, and you've got to talk to your doctor to figure that out. There are some medications that you take once a week. There are some medications that you have to take every day. There's going to be a difference in cost in the different medications. There's going to be a difference in side effects. You know, some people have very minimal side effects. Some people have some significant side effects with certain medications. So you're going to want to talk to your doctor and figure out where you're going and which medication is going to work best for you. Let's talk about rabies. So rabies is a viral disease that affects the central nervous system. It is spread through saliva, so usually a bite or a scratch that comes from an infected animal. It usually is going to be a domestic dog, but it can come from any mammal. So it could be a fox, raccoon, or a bat. So what is very important with rabies is that if you are exposed, you need to get treatment right away. Once clinical symptoms start to develop, rabies is fatal almost 100% of the time. So that rapid treatment becomes very important. You can get treated after the fact, but some people will opt to get the rabies vaccine ahead of time just so they have some protection in their symptoms. So this is going to be one of those things you're going to want to talk with your provider depending on where you're going to see if this is something that's going to be important for you. So one that many travelers are going to have to consider is yellow fever. Yellow fever, again, is spread through the bite of an infected mosquito. As of 2023, it is present in 34 different countries in Africa and 13 countries in South America. Now, what makes yellow fever vaccination unique is that it's not the countries that have yellow fever that are going to require you to get vaccinated before you come. It's every other country that's going to require you to have it after having been to a country that has yellow fever. So if you're planning on going anywhere in Africa or South America, you might really want to consider getting that vaccination. So for example, when we flew to Egypt a few years ago, they saw we had been to South Africa. And even though we were not in an area in South Africa where they have yellow fever, the guy at the gate still required that we show him proof that we had been vaccinated, which we had, and it wasn't a big deal. But that's not what the specific rules are that we had looked up before we flew there. So you just have to know there are the specific rules of what you need to have, but then at the end of the day, it's the guy at the gate who's going to make the determination. So if you're going anywhere in those areas, I would consider getting yellow fever. Fortunately, the good news is that it's just one shot. This has changed recently where it used to be you needed to get a booster every 10 years. Now they have decided that one vaccine will cover you for life unless you're spending a lot of time in one of those infected areas. So as long as you have one, you're probably good to go. So another one I thought worth mentioning was cholera. Now, cholera is not something most travelers are probably going to have to be worried about, but because there is a vaccine available, I thought I would mention it. It is spread through contaminated food and water. Most people who contract cholera have mild to no symptoms. They just need some oral rehydration, but in the serious forms of the disease, it can lead to acute watery diarrhea that can kill a person in a matter of hours. So there is a vaccine that is available if you are going to be traveling somewhere that is having acute cholera outbreaks. But probably, the only reason I mention this is because I know there are travelers who are out there volunteering their time and going to places that need help. And that might be a place where you want to consider getting a vaccine for cholera, but most travelers probably aren't going to have to worry about it. Vaccines might be a great way for you to help keep yourself healthy and safe while you are traveling the world. However, there are a few other things that you might want to consider, and I wanted to give you just a few quick tips to help you protect yourself. When you're considering foodborne illnesses, here are just a couple of tips. Eat food that has been properly cooked. Now, one great way to do this is look for restaurants that are crowded. So if you're not sure where to eat, if you see a restaurant that has a long line and lots of locals eating there, that's probably going to be a place you want to go, because not only does it have the seal of approval of all the locals, they're not going to go eat there if they know people get sick there, but also because they're crowded, that food is turning over, it's not, getting cooked and sitting out all day. Always look for crowded places. The next thing to consider is that if you do not have access to clean water, you are going to want to boil it for 1 full minute before you use it. I mean, roiling boil for a full minute. Now, the interesting thing here is that if you are at altitude, anything over 2,000 feet, altitude changes the boiling temperature of the water, and so you're going to want to boil it longer for at least 3 minutes if you are over 2,000 feet. The next thing to consider is be cautious with ice. Now, in many places around the world, if you're in a tourist place, they know you can't drink the ice. They probably aren't drinking the ice either, so it's probably fine. But if you get into a place that is cutting corners, you just want to make sure that you're not getting a lot of ice that could come from contaminated water. Next is a very basic thing. We used to talk about this in the hospital all the time. Wash your hands thoroughly and use soap. So if you are eating, if you are petting animals like dogs or cats that you think are just so adorable, make sure you wash your hands with soap afterwards. If you go to the bathroom, wash your hands with soap and water is one of the best things you can do to keep yourself safe. Finally, you want to consider if you are cooking at home and you are going to eat any fruits and vegetables, you want to make sure you wash those well. Many countries have different soaps and things that you can use that are specifically designed to wash fruits and vegetables. But another great tip is peeling them is better. Unless you're going to be cooking them, especially if you're eating them raw, peel the fruit and vegetable, and that is going to keep it safer for you to eat. You also want to make sure you are protecting yourself from mosquito-borne illnesses. And the number one most important thing you can do is not get bit by a mosquito. I know this sounds silly, and it is so important, because if you don't get bit in the first place, you don't have to worry about any of this other stuff happening. One thing you want to think about is wearing protective clothing. I know it gets hot in these tropical places, but wearing long sleeves, wearing long pants can really provide a lot of protection. Often you can get clothes that are impregnated with bug repellent right into the material. Those can be really great. You want to use mosquito nets. So a lot of times hotels, even hostels I've stayed at, have mosquito nets that are available that you can put over the bed to keep you safe at night. Make sure you tuck those under the mattress, make there's not openings around. Use those mosquito nets. They can be very effective. Next, if possible, you want to use air conditioning. Now, this is such a fascinating one, but air conditioning protects you in more ways than you think from the mosquitoes. So for one, not only does it get you behind, usually you're going to close the door if you have the air conditioning running, and with that door closed, you've got a barrier, and so nothing new is getting in. Second of all is that mosquitoes track you by following your carbon dioxide that you're breathing out. And if you get in a room with air conditioning, it's moving the air around, and it makes it harder for them to track that carbon dioxide back to your body. Another thing is they can track is heat. And at night, just in bed, your body temperature tends to be a little bit lower, but then you've also got that air conditioning on, which is making the room colder, and it can make it harder for them to find you. Here's another one, is that mosquitoes don't like the breeze. Mosquitoes can only fly about 1 to 1.5 miles per hour. So if you have a breeze moving over your body, like a fan can work for this too, that breeze is just going to blow them away and make it so they can't get to you. So splurge for that air conditioning because it's going to help keep you protected. And lastly, make sure you use an effective mosquito repellent. Many times the recommendation is to get something with DEET in it, but there are, depending on where you are in the world, you might find something else that's going to work for you. Another tip is that if you're using sunscreen, and of course as the nurse, I always recommend sunscreen, put the sunscreen on first and put the mosquito repellent on top of that so that it still works. If you are a long-term traveler and are looking for more travel tips, take a look at these 2 videos right over here. Today and not tomorrow.